Kids with ADHD hear up to 20,000 more negative messages by the age of 10 than their peers, which wires our brain to be hypervigilant and oversensitive to critique. You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper. Welcome back to My Rejection Story. Today's episode is about rejection sensitive dysphoria, or otherwise known as rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Rejection is hard, and if you have ADHD like I do, it is really, really hard. I'm pretty sure that you pressed play today because, like me, you feel things deeply. You have been searching for answers. Is there something wrong with you? Why are you so sensitive? Why does rejection hurt so much? I'm going to be diving all into that, the science, case studies from Reddit, case studies from my life experience, and also what the research says on how you can cope with rejection sensitive dysphoria. If you are brand new here, welcome. You are part of this space, this collective place of belonging, a place where being sensitive isn't a weakness. Being sensitive is a sign that you have a capacity to feel a lot, and as long as you know how to harness those feelings in the right places, they will be your superpower. Okay, rejection sensitive dysphoria. What is this? What is RSD? RSD is the intense emotional pain that is triggered by a perceived or a real rejection. It often feels like sudden anger, shame, withdrawal, or people-pleasing. Have you ever experienced that feeling where your brain goes offline? It doesn't feel like any rational thoughts are coming in or out. You just freeze, and it feels like the whole world is ending. This is what I personally go through when I perceive rejection or experience rejection. The term rejection sensitive dysphoria was coined in the 1990s by Dr. William Dodson, but emotional dysregulation in ADHD has been studied since the 1960s by Dr. Paul Wender. So studies show that social rejection activates the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which is the same part of the brain that regulates physical pain. So it is so normal if it hurts like hell. You literally feel rejection like a burn or injury, but worse because you remember it much more vividly than you remember physical pain. So Dr. William Dodson, who coined the term RSD or rejection sensitive dysphoria, he found that kids with ADHD hear up to 20,000 more negative messages by the age of 10 than their peers, which wires our brain to be hypervigilant and oversensitive to critique. Like, this stats blew my mind because, like, there is a reason. I don't know, I found it really validating. I was like, there is a reason why I hate rejection so much. There's a reason why I spend so much of my life actively avoiding rejection, doing whatever I could to avoid rejection. It's not all made up, you know. There's all those tiny times where in the schooling environment, I was told I was too messy. I daydreamed too much. My brain was too scatterbrained. I didn't draw between the lines. You know, that stuff really, really adds up. And it was from no ill intent on my end, and definitely no ill intent on your end if you went through something similar. So I went perusing through Reddit to see if I was alone, and I'm definitely not alone. I mean, I found some amazing Facebook groups all about rejection sensitive dysphoria, Facebook groups filled with people with ADHD sharing their stories. And then I also found some stories in Reddit. On one Reddit forum called ADHD Woman, someone writes, "Any rejection or criticism sends me into black and white thinking. I can't just hide in my home forever. I've tried." That black and white thinking is something I personally have struggled with so much, you know, where it's just like I've perceived this criticism as meaning that this person hates me, and they don't want anything to do with me and the world is ending and I may as well just stop trying to do whatever it is, whether it was be their friend or be their business partner or be a contractor for their work. That is something that I've had to work on a lot in my adult years. In another ADHD Reddit group, someone writes, "It feels like a punch in the guts. I've never felt like throwing a chair except in that moment." I totally relate to that kind of physical sensation. It's like all the air is knocked out of you. You can't quite comprehend what's happening. Another Reddit post, an ADHD woman, someone writes, "Anything like a late text or someone not including me, I automatically think it's an issue with me. It's caused me to lose friends." This, it breaks my heart because it almost is like our rejection sensitive dysphoria becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You read in too much to the perceived rejection or, someone not wanting to hang out with you that day doesn't mean they don't want to be your friend forever. And acting out or removing yourself from a situation, the social costs can be really huge. And if it's not something we learn to manage, it can cause a lot of isolation and loss. And that's why I think this is such an important topic. And I'm going to dive into all of the different ways, some of the different ways that we can better manage our RSD. So these stories that I'm sharing are not rare. There are thousands and thousands of them online, and I'm going to link to some of the groups that I've found if you want to go and hear from other people living with RSD. In fact, William Dodson, I mentioned earlier, Dr. William Dodson, who coined RSD, he has found that 99% of people with ADHD experience rejection sensitive dysphoria, and 1/3, so 1 out of 3 people with ADHD say that it's their most impairing symptom. I did not know that before researching this episode. I would have thought that productivity would be the most impairing symptom, but to think that 1 out of 3 people find rejection sensitivity as the most impairing symptom. And I guess there's huge emotional costs to RSD. It can make it really difficult to sustain relationships unless we learn to manage it. I have a story also of losing a relationship. I guess it was probably because of rejection, but I didn't deal with the rejection, which could have saved the relationship. So I was 14 years old and I was sitting at lunchtime, break time at my school with my friends. And one of my friends came up with this idea that we should go to a water park on the weekend. So she was saying like, "Oh, we should totally go to the water park." And then she started asking people individually if they'd like to join. So she looked at each person, so like, "Karen, would you like to come? Jessica, would you like to come?" I'm making up names. There were probably 7 or 8 of us. And she went around the group and asked everyone except for me. I remember my face heating up. I remember feeling so hot. I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath me. I wasn't able to think. No thoughts were coming to my mind. I went offline, and I remember sitting through the rest of that break time in absolute shock. I wasn't hearing anything anyone was saying. My brain was not there. And the minute that bell rang, I ran away, and I actually stopped being friends with her. That was the end of our friendship. I found a new group of friends to hang out with in school, and I never spoke about this. I never addressed it. And I remember it being so painful because I had been spending weekends with that friend. I'd spent many weekends. We'd even gone to the water park together, and she was inviting people who she'd never hung out with out of school. So it was a definite slight on me. And that was a real rejection. I think that was a deliberate move. That was probably petty high school stuff. But I know that back then I definitely didn't have the tools to communicate, and maybe it was something that could be resolved, maybe not, but at least we should be able to talk about stuff as it happens, because miscommunication can happen. But I also wish that I could say that I don't experience that full body experience when I'm rejected. And I do still experience that full body experience. But I have developed tools to process, get out of that like freeze, brain offline mode. I can get back into my body, back into my mind, and then respond from a regulated space. And so I'm going to be going through some of the kind of research tools that I found when I was researching for this episode, for anyone here who can relate to this, who has ever experienced this. Maybe it's an issue that comes up in your relationship. Maybe it's something that comes up in friendship and work environments. There are tools and there is a way to regulate and get better at managing rejection. So RSD test. Do you have RSD? Is this something that you actually struggle with? Or do you just feel the normal sting of rejection? Because I think rejection will hurt anyone. There are tests out there that you can look at. So I'm actually going to be linking in the show notes a free expert back test by ADD Attitude magazine, ADD Attitude magazine. I don't know how I'm meant to say that, but they're very reputable and they have a free test that I'll link in the show notes. Some of the questions they ask are, do you feel anxious in social situations because you assume that no one likes you? Do you consider yourself a people pleaser, going above and beyond to get on someone's good side? Do you pass up opportunities or avoid starting projects because you are afraid you will fail? While no tests are diagnostics, I think that if you're answering yes or agreeing strongly to a lot of these questions, it can help you identify whether RSD might be impacting your life in a negative way. So coping tools. Is there a workbook you can work on? Is there a way to not let RSD control your life, sabotage relationships? I found a great resource in Neurodivergent Insights. So it's not technically a workbook, but I do think you can treat it like one. You could take the article, which is linked in the show notes, and you could run it through an AI and turn it into a kind of workbook that you can put into practice. And I'm going to go through some of the techniques that they talk about. One is catch the narrative. So the first thing is you need to become aware that this is your black and white thinking. This is RSD at play. And from personal experience, this is one of the hardest. And so I think, maybe I'm wrong, I think I'm pretty good at it now. I'm often able to catch myself before I go into a full-blown RSD meltdown. But it has taken a lot of time. And by a lot of time, for me personally, it has taken years to get here. And I have really struggled with shame because I've known that this is something I struggle with. And then I still get triggered. I still go into this RSD mode. And then I feel shamed because I should know better. I've I've done the research. So I just want to say that expecting yourself to get this perfect is probably an unrealistic expectation, at least from personal experience. It's a muscle. It's just if you are going to run a marathon, you are not going to be able to run a marathon the first time you run. That's a very unrealistic expectation. If you tell yourself that's what you've got to do, you are going to feel really disappointed and demotivated because it's kind of impossible. I'm sure no matter how good your genes are, unless you've been doing a ton of other exercise, but for most people, it's pretty damn hard to just run 42 kilometers with no training. So similarly, I think that you need to give yourself time, and the first step is knowing this is something you're working on. So when you do catch it, try and externalize what you're thinking. So in the Neurodivergent Insights book, they offer you to put it in writing, journal. So you might find okay, I'm feeling very triggered. I'm feeling very dysregulated. I feel hot. I feel flustered. You may not know what's going on. So one technique is to start journaling about it. Say I need some time away. Ask whoever it is that has triggered this. Maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a colleague. You could say, hey, I need an hour or two, remove yourself from a situation and journal about it. That is a great tool to actually figure out what's going on and what you can do. Another very important part is emotional acceptance. So emotional acceptance can be really challenging because of other factors. There's past trauma that can make it very difficult to accept things. So it's a practice. Again, try to acknowledge and allow your emotions without attempting to change them. This can offer clarity and it can reduce self-criticism. So when you notice yourself feeling really anxious, really sensitive, really triggered, try and just allow that to happen. That removes so much of the pressure, and it also reduces the chance of you acting out. So you say, okay, I am feeling rejected right now. I am feeling hurt right now. I'm questioning whether my boss really wants me as an employee in their team. Allow that feeling in, because that allows you to emotionally distance, which is the next step. So this is when you view your experience of rejection from an external standpoint, almost like you're an observer or passerby. According to some research done by Adak and Cross in 2010, this external perspective can expedite the fading of negative emotions. So really being able to distance yourself by saying, all right, I am feeling this, as if you are talking about someone else. And then the next step is to regulate. And again, this takes so much practice, because a lot of it is catching yourself in the moment. And that is something that comes with time and practice, but it does get easier. I promise you it gets easier. So one regulation technique you can do is deep breathing. Because rejection makes our bodies perceive it as a threat to our safety, deep breathing is a signal to your nervous system that you're safe, and you can then approach the situation with more clarity. So one deep breathing technique is to inhale deeply through your nose for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 1 to 2 seconds. Slowly exhale through your mouth for a count of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This extended exhale is crucial for triggering the relaxation response, so make sure you're putting that into practice. There's lots of other things you can do to help regulate. There's guided meditations. I'll link to some in the show notes. Sensory grounding practices. So one of those is to just notice all your senses. What are you feeling? What are you feeling on your hands? Like, where are your feet? I can feel my back pressed against to the back of this chair. I can feel my bum on the chair. I can feel my feet on the ground, my hand on the chair. Notice what you're seeing, what is around you, what are you smelling, if anything, what can you hear, and what can you taste, if you can taste anything. Maybe it's just your mouth. And then self-compassion and acceptance, one of the hardest. So one is affirmations. It's so cheesy, but it works. The science really does say that it works. So being able to remind yourself that you are capable, you are lovable, you are great, and give yourself stories you can believe. So, for example, maybe your boss has just told you that your assignment sucks. Maybe you're a writer. Your writing is too convoluted and it's hard to read. Now, for a rejection sensitive dysphoric response to that is, oh my God, I'm a terrible writer. I should give up my career. I should just stop. And a self-affirmation that could work would be, all right. I mean, this is kind of how I would go through this practice. Would be like, okay, I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling like my work is not worth anything. I feel like I should just give up. And okay, this is making me feel insecure about my role as a writer. And then the next step would be, what do I know to be true? And also what actually happened. So what actually happened is that my boss said that this one assignment was not great. It could be developed in some ways. He didn't say that I suck and that all my writing sucks. So let's just kind of put that into practice. And then self-affirmations would come in of me being like, okay, what evidence do I have that supports that I am a good writer? What about that time my article went viral? What about that time I won that award? What about that time that I got top of my class in university? Try and find things that counter that narrative to kind of shift your brain into a neutral space where it can see what has actually happened, which is that you could develop this one piece of writing further and not that you suck as a writer. So that's an example. When I was studying, I used to take negative feedback on my writing really, really badly. And then also, when, affirmations feel like too much, so just saying I'm amazing and whatever isn't working, I would also advise you to find real affirmations grounded in fact. Just remind yourself that this is a difficult moment. It's a painful experience because you care, because the care is really what comes in. If you had half-assed that writing assignment and not even thought about it before submitting it, it probably wouldn't hurt as much because it wasn't your best work. This experience is painful and that is okay. I am learning and growing from this. I always like to remind myself that, I learn from hard shit. And as much as it feels like the end of the world in the moment, I try to remind myself, big picture, this is going to help me. My worth is not determined by this one experience. Really important. Mistakes are part of being human, and they don't define me. And I am resilient. I can overcome challenges. So again, all of that advice is coming from a resource I found in Neurodivergent Insights, which is linked in the show notes. And you can take this and turn it into your own workbook that you can put into practice on an ongoing basis to help you manage rejection sensitive dysphoria. Something that you might be wondering is there treatment? Is there a magic pill you can take? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. So what I would say to this is that if you can afford it, it's totally worth it to find a good psychologist and psychiatrist. If you believe you meet the RSD kind of checkpoints, if you have ADHD, or even if you don't know if you have ADHD, if RSD is really debilitating and affecting your relationships with other people, it's never a bad idea to turn to professional mental health care. So I would recommend that if that is an option. Medication, I don't know. I think it's worth talking to a medical professional. Personally, I take Ritalin on many work days. It has helped me stay more regulated. I think it kind of activates the frontal lobe of my brain. But I do think that most of my regulation, my improvements with regulation has come from a lot of trial and error and a lot of practice and a lot of research. So I personally am not of the belief that a pill can just fix things. If this episode has been helpful for you, if this is something you struggled with and you now feel a little bit more clarity on how you can deal with it, you feel a little bit less alone, I want to remind you that you are not alone. So many people struggle with RSD. In fact, 99% of all ADHDers struggle with RSD. And I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people have ADHD. We're having this rising phenomenon of people being diagnosed. And I just think it's because there's a lot more awareness out there of what ADHD is. People have been living undiagnosed with ADHD for millennia, probably. So RSD is far more common than most people realize. You are not too much, and you are wired for emotional depth. You can have fulfilling relationships as long as you know how to self-regulate. So you have the tools now. If somebody sent you this episode, I think that it's a sign that they care about you. They may relate to this as well. And if you are listening solo, if you found this episode, I want to just remind you that I see you. I've been there. You're valid. You're doing your best. If this episode was helpful, please share it with a friend. I am so appreciative of people sharing episodes. You can also tag me on social media if it was helpful. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I can't wait to tune in with you next week. This was My Rejection Story, hosted by me, Alice Draper.